Kia ora koutou. My name is Patrick Bowman and I'll be giving this presentation to you today. Admittedly, it's quite a weird presentation. My laptop's there's actually no one else in the room, and I'll be going back and forth to the computer over there to change slides. So you'll have to excuse me doing that. I'll be coming in and out of focus. But what I'll be talking about, hopefully pretty successfully, is cross-cultural communication in New Zealand schools. So what I mean by that is asking the question, how well is multicultural and bicultural communication covered in the primary and secondary curriculum in Aotearoa New Zealand, and as much as Aotearoa New Zealand has the primary and secondary curriculum. So in general, you'll see that I think there are some challenges and some issues here that I think do need addressing, but I'll get to that, I guess, in due course. I just got a photo here from Nelson, actually, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't typically think of Nelson as a multicultural kind of mecca, but it just illustrates, I think, really, really well. It's actually a primary school event hosted by the Multicultural Council of Nelson in 2014. I think it just illustrates really well where we're going as a nation, and hopefully illustrates, I guess, some of the themes of this presentation. So I guess the first point is that Aotearoa New Zealand is increasingly made up of varied cultures, but this hasn't always been the case. It's been bicultural since the 18th century and the arrival of Anglo-Celtic Europeans, so for the most part from Great Britain and Ireland. So quite a culturally narrow group, and they came and joined, admittedly not without acrimony, not without disagreement, the indigenous Māori population, and Te Whenua. So a result of that, I guess, has been the idea of New Zealand as a bicultural nation. This idea kind of persists both as our de jure political policy and also in our popular imaginary. I guess I should also point out that small communities from outside this group have been here since the settlement period, and often these histories are only just being told. So Chinese Yugoslavs, for example, Dalmatians, we're always here, yeah, admittedly, and subject to actually quite perverse legislation and discrimination, actually, as so-called race aliens, but for the most part, bicultural kind of mix. But I guess this bicultural rhetoric and also our biculturalism in practice is increasingly challenged by migration waves, and these migration waves have come from diverse sources. And these increasingly contribute to a de facto multicultural society in New Zealand. So this migration began in the 1960s with Pacifica people from the Pacific Islands, primarily driven by labour requirements of a full employment economy. Later joined by Asian peoples from, I guess, the 1980s, with successive governments here seeking wealthy migrants with capital and competitive skills. From the 1990s, refugees and others from diverse locations, including Somalia, Sudan and Kosovo, have also been a feature. And today, more than 25% of our foreign-born population, are foreign-born. So that's actually the third highest in the OECD, incredibly high by European standards, by Western standards, higher in fact than Canada and the USA, so these traditional countries of migration, higher than them, I think third behind Ireland and Australia. So very, very high. And of course, to make the point, New Zealand, largest city, Auckland, is in fact more diverse than London. Very important point. So what does this mean? It actually means New Zealand is home to many different groups, each with their own cultures, beliefs, values, attitudes, meanings, social hierarchies, ways of behaving, and crucially, ways of communicating. Of course, this diversity represents a rich opportunity for the country, leveraging different ways of knowing and being and adding a rich diversity, but it also presents challenges. Chief among these challenges is the need to preserve effective communications between the groups making their lives here, to make sure that as New Zealanders we're not, as Joan Michi, a former Race Relations Commissioner, put it, speaking past each other, which is a really nice way of putting it, I think. So it is clear that intercultural communication, so what I mean by that is interpersonal everyday interaction between and across cultural groups, will be increasingly common going forward. In politics, business, leisure, all across our lives, all across our lifeways, and it's important that in these contexts to recognise that as groups come together, misunderstandings and tensions can arise, even where there is the greatest goodwill on both sides. And this really will need to be proactively managed. Communication across cultures is not actually an innate skill. Authors have recognised how it requires an understanding of the points of difference between cultures, and it requires us to be more aware that attitudes and behaviours can present barriers to effective communication. New Zealand's communications authors Barnett and O'Rourke have pointed out that cultural knowledge is something rarely taught or discussed explicitly. We pick it up almost unconsciously. Gudi Kunst, a very important American author in the field of communications, believes that intercultural communications requires three key skills. These are motivation, so developing an attitude or willingness to learn about other cultures. It requires skill, so improving techniques such as dialogue and listening. And knowledge, increasing knowledge by learning about other cultures. Nevertheless, and despite multiculturalism increasing daily in this country, very little effort is paid to the formal teaching of any of these skills, or of intercultural competence more broadly, as we shall see. The first, I guess the biggest, from my point of view, limitation is the lack of language learning in New Zealand schools. In expanding understandings of diversity, language learning is an important aspect of improving intercultural relationships. According to the Ministry of Education, learning languages equips learners for living in a world of diverse peoples, languages, and cultures. Nevertheless, this instruction is not actually an integral part of the New Zealand curriculum. Unlike many overseas countries, the New Zealand curriculum has long followed here a so-called outcomes-based approach rather than the defined syllabus approach. This is good things. In many ways it's a good thing. It's more flexible, so it allows boards, teachers and schools to define individual programs as they deem appropriate. But in the framework of 1993, so this is the this version of this outcome-based curricula, 7 essential learning areas were included. So these are areas, outcomes that schools are legislatively required to teach. Unfortunately though, none of these included language education or cross-cultural education more broadly. Schools had to teach 7 of these essential skills, but without it being compelled, schools had no particular reason to teach languages. For me, for example, I was taught under this 1993 framework. The sum total of my second language teaching was a rather cursory look at Te Reo Māori. Following, however, the curriculum stocktake in 2002, the Ministry belatedly decided that learning languages should be formally included as a separate learning area. This has seen learning languages appear as an 8th learning area in the new 2007 curriculum. However, fortunately, it remains the only one which is not compulsory. While the curriculum states that all schools with students at years 7 to 10 should be working towards offering students opportunities for learning in second or subsequent languages, students are not required to take the language, even if it is offered in their school. And this, quite shockingly for me, is that despite our formerly bicultural status, Te Reo Māori education remains a non-compulsory part of the New Zealand education system. So I guess the second interrelated part of the limitations, I guess, that I see in New Zealand schools as white spaces. This is another factor that also limits the level of effectiveness of the preparation given to students to communicate across cultures. This is the lack of our schools, I guess, to be aware of their cultural limitations and acknowledge the integrity and value of cross-cultural learning. Teachers remain here predominantly white, middle class and female. There's nothing particularly wrong with that, but it does reflect a certain sameness of values, beliefs and attitudes, and this, I guess, can be said of the system as a whole. Milne has described this as the white stream. There is a clear resulting lack of focus on knowledge or understanding of cultures outside of Western norms. As a primary school teacher pointed out last week in an article on national standards, some children can do basic addition while others struggle to count to 5. Some can write their name while others can't hold a pencil yet. But they will have other skills. For example, they might be able to speak Tongan or Samoan, and that's amazing, but it's not recognised in our system. So if these are kind of some of the limitations, I just want to conclude to point out that New Zealand's increasing levels of diversity mean cross-cultural communication will be increasingly important. This increasing importance, however, is not, as we've seen, matched in our schooling system, which continues to treat language learning as a poor sister to other areas of the curriculum. In addition, I think it's fair to say that schools are white spaces with cultural knowledges outside of dominant Pākehā norms minimised and typically undervalued. Change needs to be made to ensure future students in our country meets its potential into the future. Thank you very much.